In the last 3 years, I've spoken with a lot of customers, and there are things that come up when we talk about Salesforce data security. And then there are things that a lot of customers miss out on. Fortunately, some of the customers I've spoken with are very, very data privacy oriented. So they bring up things that I think most of us lose out on. So here is a summary of some of the considerations for Salesforce Sandbox data security. The first is fairly common. Most customers know about it, but the other three are not. Let me start with the most common one. Email blast from sandboxes. So you have a full copy or a partial copy sandbox with real customer data, real email addresses. You run a test script or some automation. You upload data and a trigger gets activated. Something happens and you have an email blast. So a test email went out to real customers. That's a huge challenge for a lot of companies, because for listed companies, that is considered unauthorized data access or a breach. And then they have to follow their entire process. You have to work with legal, compliance, marketing, come up with an apology message, send it out, clean up, work with IT to make sure it never happens again. Lots of embarrassment and inconvenience, and really takes focus away from what you're trying to do. Definitely the number one reason that every customer I talk to who wants to consider sandbox data masking thinks about this. The other three that I'm going to mention are not so commonly thought about. Especially with COVID, what's happened is you have a lot of third-party contractors and partners accessing your sandboxes. And in the past, it was okay because there were not that many privacy laws. But now a lot of privacy laws require that the access to personal information is maintained within the borders of a country. And often with outsourcing and outshoring arrangements, that may not happen. So that's a reason that is coming up more and more. In the past, customers would do like an NDA with a company and that worked. But now that's just not enough. You also do run a material risk of data breach. Someone accidentally or deliberately exported out data. You can put stuff like Shield for data exfiltration, but it's still a post-mortem. Preventatively, you just want that data to be masked. And we do that all for our customers, where they're masking hundreds of millions of records with us just to make sure that their partners have access to masked data and there's no compliance or security risk. One of the interesting use case is that this conversation tends to happen for third parties, and we forget that we have the same challenge with ex-employees or just some rogue employee or a disgruntled one. They have access to data. So if you have an ex-employee and they left, and if it was using a username password type thing, they may still have access unless you went in manually and inactivated them. And this is a huge challenge if you're a large company, you have multiple orgs. I have 5 production orgs and I have 3-4 sandboxes each. That's 15, 20 sandboxes. And over the years, someone who was doing testing for me may have been in multiple orgs. So I've spoken to customers who express this concern, particularly because their sandboxes are just using username password. So that person may be able to get in later on also. The second part of this is if you're a large company, if you have 10, 15, 20, 30,000 users in an org, I mean, guess what? People who have access to this, whether they're your employees, ex-employees, third-party partners, not only do they have access to that employee information in your full and partial copy sandbox, but they also have access to this information in dev-only sandboxes, which most companies would literally give those out like candies on Halloween. But you run the risk that these people now can just pull out a list of your 20, 30,000 employee, their email address, their mobile phone numbers, and things like that. The third part of this, which a lot of customers don't think about, and I actually ran into this because one of the customers mentioned that they had this problem. You created a sandbox and it's still pointing to a production backend, ERP or some other, integrations. And accidentally someone didn't change that connection. This typically happens in the post-refresh activity. And if you accidentally forget to change it, then your sandbox is now pinging a production non-Salesforce system or APIs or web services and altering production data. And that's also true for connected apps and things like that. So, that's another area where you want automation, not only for masking, but for post-refresh activities. We actually built a whole lot of post-refresh, updating single sign-ons, remote site settings, custom labels, things like that, predominantly because we got that kind of feedback from customers. So 3 simple things when you think about data security and masking. 1, email blast from sandbox. 2, unauthorized access by third-party ex-employers through lack of SSO due to access to partial or even dev sandboxes. And third is sandboxes that can go against production backends because remote site setting and other integration settings were not updated. And so we actually work with customers to address all the three. If that's something that you're thinking about, definitely check out more on how you can address those. Thank you.